For my 30th birthday, my family chartered a private jet to Aspen without me. I found out on Instagram at 7 in the morning. There was a photo of my sister, Kayla, holding a glass of champagne, captioned "Family First." I typed a single comment asking why I was not told. My father replied publicly 3 minutes later. "We did not want to drag the help along. Enjoy your quiet weekend." I did not cry. I did not scream. I just smiled, typed "surprise waiting for you when you land," and closed the app. That same day, I made a decision. 2 days later, my sister was live streaming a meltdown, my mother was sobbing, and my father was begging me to pick up the phone. They thought I was the help. They were about to find out I was the bank. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Have you ever been excluded from a family event you paid for? I would love to know who is part of our community. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and looked at my husband, David. He was flipping pancakes, whistling a low tune, completely unaware that my entire history with my family had just incinerated in the span of 3 minutes. I did not tell him immediately. I did not want to ruin the morning for Leo, who is currently trying to feed a piece of bacon to his toy dinosaur. Instead, I walked into my home office and closed the door. This room was my sanctuary. It was where I designed skylines, where I calculated load-bearing walls and stress points. It was where I made the money that kept my parents and sister draped in designer labels. I sat down and opened a file I had not looked at in months. I named it Family Maintenance. It was a spreadsheet, cold and precise, detailing exactly what it cost to be a member of the Henderson family. I scrolled down the columns. $5,800 a month for the rent on the Gold Coast condo my parents claimed they owned, but which I had quietly leased for them 3 years ago when my father's third business venture collapsed. $1,200 for the lease on my father's Range Rover, because appearance was the only currency he respected. $3,000 in direct transfers to Kayla's business account for what she called brand investment, which usually meant champagne lunches and buying followers to inflate her ego. I stared at the total at the bottom of the screen. It was a staggering number. A number that could have paid off my own mortgage. A number that could have funded Leo's college tuition twice over. For years, I told myself I did it because I could, because I was successful, because that is what family does. But looking at that number now, with the echo of my father's comment ringing in my ears, I realized I had been lying to myself. I was not being generous. I was paying a subscription fee for love that never arrived. There is a specific kind of trap that happens when you are raised as the useful child. It is not loud or violent. It is a quiet, normalized cruelty that conditions you to believe your value is entirely dependent on what you can provide. Growing up, Kayla was the star. She was beautiful, charismatic, the one who was destined for greatness. I was the sturdy one, the practical one, the one who worked double shifts in high school to pay for my own car while my parents paid for Kayla's modeling classes. They taught me that my role was to be the fuel that kept the golden child warm. I internalized it so deeply that I thought writing checks was the only way to keep them in my life. I thought if I just paid enough, eventually they would look at me the way they looked at her. But that morning, the illusion shattered. My father did not call me the help by accident. He did not say it to be funny. He said it because it was the truth. To them, I was not a daughter or a sister. I was a utility. I was the electricity that kept the lights on, the foundation that held up their house of cards. And just like a utility, they did not think about me until I stopped working. They did not invite the electricity to Aspen. They just expected it to be there when they flipped the switch. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon some sense of regret or sadness, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. And for the first time in 30 years, I was looking at the red ink and realizing the investment had never been viable. I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. I built skyscrapers for a living. I knew better than anyone that you cannot build a stable structure on a rotten foundation. You have to condemn it. You have to demolish it. And then you walk away from the rubble. I saved the spreadsheet. Then I opened a new tab. I pulled up the contact information for the leasing agent of the condo. I pulled up the login for the family cell phone plan. I pulled up the credit card portal. My hands were not shaking. My heart was not racing. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me, the kind of focus I usually reserved for a complex demolition project. They wanted a weekend without the help. I was going to give them a lifetime without the bank. At 12 o'clock, I sat in my ergonomic chair, straightened my spine, and picked up the phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call my sister. I called the leasing agent for the Gold Coast condo. His name was Marcus, and he answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful, expecting a renewal. I kept my voice flat, stripped of any inflection that might betray hesitation. I told him I was exercising the termination clause on the lease. I told him that effective immediately, I was removing myself as the guarantor. He sputtered. He tried to explain the penalties, the breach of contract, the fact that my parents were currently living there. I let him finish. Then I told him that the occupants were welcome to stay, provided they could pass a credit check and provide the first and last month's rent by Monday. We both knew they could not. I told him to consider this their 30-day notice. When I hung up, I did not feel guilty. I felt lighter. It was 12:15. I logged into the wireless provider's dashboard. There they were, 3 lines named Dad, Mom, and Kayla, star, consuming data like it was oxygen. I hovered the cursor over the Select All checkbox. For a second, my finger hovered. I thought about the safety net I had provided, the way I ensured they were always connected, always reachable. Then I remembered my father's comment. They did not want to be reached by me. They wanted the service without the provider. I clicked Suspend Service. The screen refreshed. Status: inactive. It was 12:30. Next was the country club. This was the hardest one, not because I cared about golf, but because I knew this was the pillar of my father's identity. It was the only place where he could pretend he was still the titan of industry he claimed to be in the 90s. I called the membership office. I told them to remove my credit card from the file immediately. The clerk asked if I wanted to replace it with another method of payment. I said no. I said the account was now the sole responsibility of the member. I knew that the next time he tried to buy a round of drinks for his old cronies, the card would bounce, and the illusion would shatter right there at the 19th hole. It was 12:45. Finally, I opened the banking portal for the supplementary credit card I had issued to Kayla. The pending transactions were already populating. $400 for lift tickets. $200 for a sushi lunch. She was living her best life, funded by the sister she despised. I could see a new charge attempting to go through right now, a hold for a VIP table at a club in Aspen. I did not just lock the card. I reported it lost or stolen. The transaction declined instantly on my screen. I imagined the scene in Aspen, the waiter returning the card, the confusion, the public embarrassment. I sat back, the silence of the room amplifying the hum of my computer. People often talk about cutting ties with family as if it is a tragedy, a great loss that leaves you hollow. But as I watched the confirmation emails roll in, lease terminated, service suspended, account closed, I realized they were wrong. There is an invisible chain that binds the survivor to the people who hurt them. It is not made of love. It is made of the desperate, childlike hope that if you just give enough, if you just endure enough, they will finally see you. You think the chain is holding you together, keeping you safe. But it is not. It is a leash. And the moment you snap it, you do not fall. You fly. I realized then that the pain I had felt for years was not the burden of carrying them. It was the strain of holding on to people who were trying to drown me. Letting go was not an act of violence. It was the first breath of air I had taken in a decade. I was not losing a family. I was escaping a cage I had paid for. I closed the laptop. It was 1 o'clock. In Aspen, the credit card reader was flashing an error message. In Chicago, the leasing agent was drafting an eviction warning. And in my home office, for the first time in my life, the ledger was balanced. I walked out to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. I knew the silence would not last. But for now, it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It took 48 hours for the silence to break. I tracked their movements not through texts, but through the notifications on my phone. Uber Black Ride requested from O'Hare Airport to my address. They did not go to the condo. They did not go to a hotel. They came straight to the source of the funding, like parasites sensing the host was trying to detach. I saw the headlights sweep across the living room wall at 8 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday. David stood up from the couch, his face hardening. He walked to the front door and locked the deadbolt, then engaged the heavy security screen I had installed last year, a purchase my father had mocked as paranoid, but which I now recognized as foresight. The pounding started 10 seconds later. It was not a knock. It was an assault. I walked to the entryway. I did not hurry. I checked the camera feed on my phone first. My father, Robert, was red-faced, slamming his fist against the wood. My mother, Brenda, was already weeping, her hands covering her face in a pose of theatrical despair. And there was Kayla. She was not crying. She was holding her phone up, the ring light clipped to the top blindingly bright in the evening gloom. She was live streaming. I opened the main door, but left the steel security mesh locked between us. The sound of their chaos flooded the hallway. "Open this door, Megan," my father roared. He looked disheveled, his polo shirt stained, the veneer of the country club gentleman completely stripped away by the indignity of flying commercial. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a card declined in front of the vice president of sales? They cut up the card, Megan. They cut it up at the table. Guys, this is what I am dealing with," Kayla said to her phone, angling the camera to catch my face through the mesh. "My own sister literally stranded us in the mountains with no way home. She hacked my accounts. She is having a mental breakdown and taking it out on us." I looked at the camera lens, then at Kayla's eyes. There was no fear there, only calculation. She was trying to spin the narrative before the truth could land. "I did not hack anything," I said. My voice was calm, barely rising above a conversational volume. "I just stopped paying the bills. There is a difference." "You abandoned your family," my mother wailed, stepping forward to grip the mesh. "We had to borrow money from strangers to get a flight. We had to sit in the last row. Megan, how could you be so cruel? After everything we have done for you?" David stepped up behind me. He did not say a word. He just placed a hand on my shoulder, a silent, solid weight that reminded them I was not the lonely teenager they used to bully. My father's eyes flicked to David, and for a split second, he hesitated. But his entitlement was too deeply rooted to be intimidated by silence. "You think this is funny?" Robert spat. "You think you can just cut us off? That money is not a gift, Megan. It is an obligation. We had an agreement. You manage the finances because you are the one with the steady job, and we handle the family legacy." "The legacy?" I asked. "You mean the image? You mean the lie? We're going to sue you," Kayla snapped, lowering the phone slightly but keeping the recording running. "My manager said this is financial abuse. You made us dependent on you, and then pulled the rug out to control us. That is illegal, Megan. That is coercive control." I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, cold and sharp. Financial abuse. They were accusing me of abusing them by closing my own wallet. It was the logic of a hijacker angry that the hostage stopped serving drinks. "You are welcome to try," I said. "But if you file a lawsuit, discovery will be public. And I do not think your followers want to see the receipts for the bot farms you have been buying with my money." Kayla went pale. She ended the stream instantly. "I did not strand you," I said, looking at my father. "I did not embarrass you. I just stopped paying for the stage you stand on. If you want to be rich, Dad, go build something. But you are not building it on my back anymore." "We are your parents," he screamed, slamming his hand against the mesh one last time. "You owe us everything." "I owe you nothing," I said. "The debt is paid." I closed the heavy wooden door. I threw the deadbolt. I listened to them scream for another 5 minutes, threats of lawsuits and disownment muffled by the solid oak. Then, I heard the car doors slam and the Uber pull away. I turned to David. My hands were not shaking. I felt lighter, as if the gravity in the room had suddenly decreased. But I knew this was not over. People like them do not just walk away when the money stops. They come back for the copper wiring in the walls. The silence after they left was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. David went to check on Leo, but I went straight back to my office. My father's threat about financial abuse had triggered something in my brain, a professional instinct. In my line of work, when a contractor threatens to sue you for enforcing a contract, you do not just double-check the contract. You audit the entire job site. I did not sleep that night. I pulled every financial record, every deed, every tax document associated with my name. By morning, I realized the mess was too big for a spreadsheet. I needed a scalpel. I hired a forensic accountant named Sarah, a woman recommended by my firm's legal team. She did not care about family dynamics. She cared about math. It took her 3 days to find the anomaly. I was at my standing desk, reviewing blueprints for a new high-rise, when she called. Her voice was dry, professional. "Megan, I am looking at the title search for the property on Elm Street. The one you purchased in 2019 for your parents' potential retirement." "Yes," I said. "It is sitting empty. I am holding it as a long-term investment." "It is not empty of debt," Sarah said. "There is a home equity line of credit against the deed. Opened 18 months ago. The current balance is $165,000. I stared at the phone. "That is impossible. I never authorized a HELOC. I own that property outright." "The paperwork is here," she said. "It has your signature. Notarized." She emailed me the PDF. I opened it, my eyes scanning the document with the same detachment I used to look for structural cracks in concrete. There it was. My name. My signature. It looked practiced, almost perfect, except for the loop on the M. But it was not the signature that made my blood turn to ice. It was the date. October 14th. I pulled up my calendar from 2 years ago. October 14th. I was not in Chicago. I was not even in the country. I was in Tokyo, presenting a keynote on sustainable urban density at a design conference. I had passport stamps, flight manifests, and hotel receipts to prove it. I physically could not have signed that document in a notary's office in Illinois. I looked at the disbursement logs Sarah sent next. The money had not gone into the property. It had not gone into renovations. It had been siphoned out in varying amounts. $20,000 to a luxury car dealership. $15,000 to a casino in Indiana. And then, a recurring transfer of $5,000 a month to an LLC called Kalistar Media. The realization hit me with the force of a demolition ball. This was not mooching. This was not just my parents being entitled or bad with money. This was a felony. They had impersonated me. They had stolen the equity from my property, my hard work, my future security, to fund my father's gambling addiction and my sister's vanity projects. They had not just lived off my generosity, they had actively robbed me while smiling across the dinner table. I printed the documents. The pages were still warm from the printer. I laid them out on my desk, next to my passport. The evidence was absolute, irrefutable. David walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He saw my face and set the mugs down. "What is it?" "It is not a family dispute anymore," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow, metallic. "It is a crime scene." I did not cry. I did not scream. I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency line for the police. My father wanted to talk about the law. He wanted to threaten me with legal action. Fine. I was done playing daughter. I was pressing charges. I sent a single text to the group chat I had not used in weeks. "Come to the house at 6. We will settle this." It was vague enough to sound like a concession, specific enough to ensure attendance. I knew them. They would interpret settle as pay. They would smell blood in the water and come running to feast. I set the stage with the same precision I used for a client pitch. The dining room table was cleared of everything except a single manila folder and a pitcher of water. No food. No wine. This was not a social call, it was a deposition. David stood by the window, arms crossed, a silent sentinel. I sat at the head of the table, hands folded, waiting. They arrived at 5:55. They walked in with the swagger of conquerors returning to a sacked city. Robert was wearing a blazer, trying to reclaim the dignity he had lost on my doorstep days earlier. Brenda had dry eyes and a tight, expectant smile. Kayla held her phone, though she was not recording yet, She was saving the victory lap for later. They sat down without being asked. "I am glad you finally came to your senses," Robert said, leaning back and spreading his arms. "We were prepared to make this very ugly, Megan. Legal action is expensive. It is better for everyone that you decided to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I repeated, my voice neutral. "We have drafted a proposal," he continued, sliding a piece of paper across the mahogany table. It was a handwritten note on hotel stationery. $50,000. For pain and suffering. For the embarrassment you caused us in Aspen. And, of course, the reinstatement of the lease and the allowance. You do that and we will drop the lawsuit. I looked at the paper. It was a ransom note written by a child who thought they held the only key to the castle. "That is a very specific number," I said. 50,000. "It is fair," Brenda chimed in, smoothing her skirt. "Considering the emotional distress. I have not slept in days." "I have a counteroffer," I said. I opened the manila folder. I did not slide the papers across the table. I placed them down one by one, facing them. First, the deed to the Elm Street property. Second, the notarized Helic agreement with the forged signature. Third, the flight manifest proving I was in Tokyo on the day of the signing. And finally, the disbursement log showing exactly where the money went. The silence that fell over the room was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum sealing shut. Robert stared at the papers, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure left too close to a fire. Brenda put a hand to her throat. "I know about the loan," I said softly. "I know about the $165,000. I know you forged my name." That was an investment," Robert stammered, sweat beading instantly on his forehead. "We were going to pay it back. It was bridge capital. Megan, you have so much, you wouldn't even have missed it." "It is a felony," I corrected. "Identity theft. Bank fraud. Forgery." "You wouldn't," Brenda whispered. "We are your parents." "I am not the one you need to convince," I said. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was the heavy, authoritative knock of the police. I had timed it perfectly. I had filed the report at 9 in the morning, provided the evidence by noon, and coordinated the arrest for 6:15. David opened the door. Two officers stepped into the hallway, their presence filling the space with the cold reality of the law. "Robert and Brenda Henderson?" the lead officer asked. Robert stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is a misunderstanding. My daughter, we were just discussing a loan." "Please stand up and place your hands behind your back," the officer said, unhooking his handcuffs. Brenda screamed. It was a raw, piercing sound that shattered the last remnants of their pretense. As the officers moved in, Kayla jumped up, backing away toward the wall, holding her hands up in a gesture of innocence. "I did not do anything," she shrilled, looking for me to the police. "This is their mess. I did not sign anything. Megan, tell them." I had no idea. I stood up then. I walked over to the table and picked up the final piece of paper, the one I had not shown them yet. "Actually, officer," I said, handing the document to the second policeman. "You might want to see this. These are the transfer logs. $55,000 of the stolen funds were transferred directly into a business account registered to Kayla Star Media for marketing services. That is money laundering." Kayla's face went slack. She looked at me, and for the first time in her life, she did not see a sister or a rival. She saw the architect. She saw the person who had designed the trap she was standing in. "You can't," she whispered. "I am an influencer. This will ruin me." "You are not an influencer," I said. "You are an accessory." They cuffed Robert first, then Brenda, and finally, Kayla, who was hyperventilating, begging me to stop, promising she would delete her accounts, promising she would be better. As they were led out the front door, a parade of ruin under the harsh foyer lights, Robert twisted around. His eyes were wild, desperate. "Megan, please. We are family. You cannot let them take us. We are your flesh and blood." I stood in the doorway, watching them being loaded into the cruisers. The neighbors were watching. The sirens were flashing, painting the street in chaotic bursts of red and blue. "You were never family," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the radio chatter. "You were overhead costs, and I just balanced the books." I closed the door. The lock clicked into place with a heavy, final thud. Inside, the house was quiet. The air tasted clean. I turned to David, took a deep breath, and finally, for the first time in 30 years, I exhaled. 6 months is a long time in the construction world. It is enough time to pour a foundation, frame a structure, and watch the concrete cure until it is solid enough to hold up the sky. In the legal world, it is enough time for a plea deal to be signed, sealed, and delivered. Robert and Brenda took the deal. They admitted to identity theft and bank fraud to avoid the maximum sentence. My father is currently serving 18 months in a minimum security facility. My mother got 12. They lost the condo, the cars, and the country club membership. The illusion of wealth they had spent a lifetime curating evaporated the moment the gavel came down. Kayla avoided jail time by turning state's witness against them. She testified that she was coerced, a victim of her parents' machinations. The court bought it, but the internet did not. When the police report became public record, her follower count dropped to 0 overnight. The last I heard, she was working retail at a boutique in the suburbs, scanning clothes she used to claim she owned. She sends me emails sometimes, asking to talk. I have a filter set up. They go straight to a folder I never open. I am sitting on my balcony now. The sun is setting over Chicago, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and violet. David is inside reading a book to Leo. The door is open, and I can hear their voices, low and steady. There is no phone ringing. There is no crisis. There is no demand for a transfer of funds. There is a misconception about justice. People think it is about watching your enemies suffer. They think it is about the moment the handcuffs click or the moment the jail cell door slams shut. And while there was a certain clinical satisfaction in watching the law dismantle my parents' lies, that was not the victory. The victory is the silence. I realized that success is the ultimate form of justice. Not the money, not the buildings I design, but the ability to exist without them. For 30 years, I let them define my worth by what I could provide. I let them rent space in my head. Evicting them was not just a financial decision, it was a spiritual one. The best revenge is not burning their house down. It is building a new life where they simply do not exist. It is thriving so completely that their absence becomes the most valuable asset you own. I look out at the city. I used to build structures to house ungrateful people. I used to pour my equity into a black hole. Now I build for the ones who stay. The foundation is reinforced. The walls are sound. And for the first time in my life, I am not just the architect of my buildings. I am the architect of my peace. Have you ever had to balance the books on a toxic relationship? Share your story in the comments. If this story resonated with you, hit follow. We are building a community that knows exactly what you're going through.